Klaus, I want to talk to you about BEPS and what you're seeing folk wrestle with today in Germany. Tell me a little about your experience.
Yes, happy to do that, Rodney. And indeed, I think BEPS 2.0, especially the Pillar 2 part of it, has started to be really mind-boggling for a number of clients in Germany, both bigger ones as well as smaller multinational entities. They have really started to take a look into that because more and more people seem to understand what really the gist of it is. And the gist of it, in my view, is that you need a lot of data, which you probably don't have available right away. You need to sort of configure your bookkeeping accounts. You need to sort of edit your data that you might have available. And that is a process, or that in itself takes significant time to be set up properly, such that people are actually up and running once the model rules or the equivalent in the qualified domestic minimum top-up tax context actually becomes relevant for companies.
That's really interesting, Klaus, because obviously there's a little bit of time to go until the rules are projected to be enacted in most countries. This whole question of finding out whether you have the data, is that ending up being a time-intensive obligation for clients, are you finding? Or how are clients finding that as a process?
Yeah, I think there is probably no client out there who has a homogeneous ERP system across the entire group. You have dispositions, you have acquisitions, you have different divisions in a group. A division might even use a different kind of consolidation logic for the accounts. So you have a heterogeneous ERP system landscape typically, and what you need for Pillar 2 is a concrete mapping of data, so to be able to draw the data from the systems without further need of editing them. And that's simply not possible currently. I think right now, most clients face a situation where they have to spend significant efforts in coming up with the right amount of data on time because of the heterogeneous ERP landscapes they have, and that's the main problem for at least the majority of my clients.
And how are you helping clients navigate that world?
Yeah, indeed. I think the main problem with Pillar 2 is the high complexity we are facing. I mean, if you take a look at the model rules as such, you will see that you have up to, I think, roughly 90 data items, which need to be provided in order to come up with the right calculation of the globe income and loss as well as the ETR. And not all of the 90 data items are truly relevant, and part of the data items are probably not critical, even if they are relevant for clients. So what we try to achieve with the clients is, first of all, really hone that list of 90 down to, I don't know, maybe like 30 or 40, and then to say, okay, what amount out of the remaining 30 to 40 data items may already be available in your systems in any given way. Then we just need to find the right way to extract it from those systems. And if there is a remainder out of the 30 to 40 or maybe 50 data items which are actually relevant and critical to clients, then but they are not available, then we need to edit the data, or we need to come up with means how we can make the data available. So that's really the crucial part. So the main aspect in our projects is to reduce the complexity for clients. That's truly the main benefit probably clients would achieve with engaging us.
Yeah, and certainly that's going to be important because you sort of think about the complexity point you were raising and just the limited resources tax departments have for the work they already have as opposed to the future work they're going to have.
Yeah.
Now, I know also you've been doing some thinking about the future of BEPS and what that means for corporate tax departments. As you look forward, say, a year or 2 years post-implementation, what are you seeing as some of the factors that people are going to have to bear in mind as they talk about this global tax regime?
Yeah, I think it is principally similar to what we encountered with DAC 6, with the mandatory disclosure rules across Europe. Everything started off with a kind of model rule logic. And yet, if you take a close look at the implementation, which actually occurred at a local level, you'll see that there are many small differences, and you actually need to discuss about all those differences if you encounter any arrangement which might fall under those rules. And the same thing I would expect for the Pillar II model rules. So that means we will have small discrepancies occurring in each country, just in the interpretation of the terms not yet fully interpreted by the model rules themselves. And then you also have the factor of the qualified domestic minimum top-up tax. First of all, that is going to rely or substantively rely on local bookkeeping rules as opposed to the consolidated financial statements bookkeeping rules of the income inclusion rule. So that's one major difference, which might lead to a significant difference in the overall calculations. But also to become qualified domestic minimum top-up tax rules, I think it is not necessary to fully adopt each and every part of the income inclusion rules. So we might end up at the end of the day with 137 different local legislation compared to the original idea of having a harmonized kind of model rule logic. And that's really probably going to be the most crucial part in the next years. And if that happens, obviously, I think we, as well as any other Big Four company, we should position ourselves to enable our clients to meet the complexity occurring in that scenario.
That's really interesting, Klaus. And so certainly that sounds very complicated. Could it also end up meaning that, in fact, multinationals end up paying more than a minimum of 15% as a corporate tax, given the potentially varying types of financial statements that will be used?
Yeah, it's always a question of the reference point, right? So I mean, the 15% effective tax rate that refers to the bookkeeping results adjusted by certain items based on the consolidated financial statements bookkeeping regulations. However, if you use local regulations for that, you obviously change the reference point. So if you have a difference in the local bookkeeping versus the consolidated financial statements, then I think you might very well end up with a tax in above of the 50% with a reference to the consolidated financial statements, right? So it might very well be that you end up at, 16, 17, maybe 18% in total. And that's definitely also relevant because at the end of the day, you might have to really calculate the potential top-up tax for a number of jurisdictions totally separate from each other. And that's really the crucial part. And I hope that the inclusive framework comes up with a meaningful way to implement those local qualified domestic minimum top-up tax rules in order to avoid a complete chaos.
Well, Klaus, plenty to think about there. First of all, you've talked about the data process and how, as you work with people to assess how to get the data, a real cutting through complexity and simplifying down to those items, which could still be in the tens of items, but focusing on those things that will really count and really developing a process now to figure that out. And then your point on the go forward about the complexity of the rules. Certainly, as we think about this overall project, the minimum tax project, not being lazy and just defaulting back to, well, it's going to be 15%, because it could well just plain not be true. So fascinating discussion, Klaus, and thank you for your time.
You're welcome.